Lots to talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to start with Joe Rogan being censored by Spotify, new CDC data and whether COVID's fake or not, or the spree of NY shootings and how it pertains to racism in America?
Joe Rogan.
Okay. Joe Rogan left YouTube because he was escaping YouTube censorship.
Yeah.
Went on to Spotify, and Spotify has started deleting his back catalog.
So, yeah. Particularly among them are what... Have you seen the list? It's super long. So amongst them, there's a subsection that you would say are right-wing or controversial figures, including Alex Jones, Gavin McInnes,
Milo Yiannopoulos.
But the actual list is even longer than that, and it includes some head scratchers on there. I believe there's one of the guys who does... there's a scientist on there that you're just like, why did we remove this guy?
Yeah.
And so I couldn't find the rhyme or reason. The only thought that I had was, it's like, did you just pick random episodes to delete in order to cover the fact that you're mostly...
That's what I was thinking. I think and I'm not going to even say what their agenda was. I think Spotify had an agenda, probably based on making the most money possible, right? So they're just trying to like delete the things that are going to lead to less money for Spotify. But then they know if that is obvious, they're going to catch a bunch of shit for censorship. Mm-hmm. So they're also just taking random innocuous people, making them go away, and then being like, oh no, these were just the episodes we didn't like.
Do you think that makes the most money for Spotify? Because Alex Jones's third podcast where he came back, I believe was the most popular podcast that Rogan had, or one of the top 3.
Oh, I don't think it's a smart strategy necessarily, but I do think let's say that they're just going after all the Alex Jones type controversial people. Maybe they think that it's not about listens, it's about ads, and that they need to keep it family friendly enough that Spotify as a platform can go get Coca-Cola as an advertiser without having to worry about Coca-Cola pulling out when 500 people tweet them.
I'm confused though. I'm actually not certain. And this is all highly speculative because their business model, I believe, is that you can pay to upgrade Spotify. Mm-hmm. And so it's not as heavily advertiser friendly as something like YouTube, which is advertiser dependent as something like YouTube, which is nearly fully funded by advertisers.
Well, I think if you were going for the best user experience, you would just keep them all up. Mm-hmm. You would just keep them all up and let people choose what to listen to. Mm-hmm. So I'm positive that the motive isn't best user experience. So then I go, well, then the motive is most likely money.
I wonder if it's internalized agenda such that there's a belief that these are harmful things for people to listen to, and for that reason, we have to take them down, even though it's not in our financial interest. I don't know. Generally, I say follow the money.
I was going to say, I can't think of a single corporation that did that, with the exception of Chick-fil-A, just bashing gay people for as long as possible.
Yeah, because
despite the fact that it was hurting them at their bottom line.
So when I just can't see how this earns them money is, I guess, why that one falls flat for me. It's fewer eyeballs.
Only if your concern is cancel culture coming for you. Mm-hmm. Only if you're just saying we're just going to keep the platform non-controversial, and in that way we're going to try to insulate ourselves from a boycott.
But why not just wait until somebody goes at you on Twitter? These episodes, many of them were 4 years old.
I don't know.
I didn't see or hear about a single person coming for him. So anyway, that's highly speculative.
The best part is that he left YouTube because he was escaping YouTube censorship and is getting censored harder than ever by Spotify.
I hope he speaks about it. I'd be so
I want to know, Joe, how do you feel about the fact that they are just taking down episodes of yours that you probably think are good? Were you involved in the decision? Did they come to you? Did you just wake up one day and 10% of your episodes were missing?
It's interesting because I think every famous personality has something that people love about them. Like some of the late night guys are just hilarious. Mm-hmm. And if they stop being hilarious, it's like, well, that's why I'm here. Yeah. And I think the thing that people like about Joe is that you feel very comfortable that he's going to tell the truth. And I remember watching him commentate a USC fight and just being like, this is boring. This is a bad fight. And they should not have made this fight. And he was, on live broadcast thing that people paid $60 to $80 to listen to. And he's very much like that on his podcast as well. And I wonder, not that he's ever gonna, he's totally a made man at this point, but if he continued down that path, it seems to me that would absolutely shrink his reach and his audience, though not, it would just make him susceptible to the number 2. He'd still be a top 10 podcast, probably till the day that he dies.
You're saying if he doesn't speak out?
That's his thing in my mind, is his willingness to say what he thinks. And I'm curious if he doesn't address this, if he's got to be made aware of it.
I was going to say, I will cut him some slack. If Justin randomly deleted 20% of our podcast, I would have no idea unless people commented on the one day a week I go in to look at comments. So he might, literally have no idea Spotify did this.
Be totally insulated against it. Yeah. So who knows? We'll see how it unfolds.
If he doesn't speak out, he just might be bow hunting. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He's got a cool setup. So I hear a nice lake house in Austin that I'm sure has an archery range inside of his place and a secret ball pit for his kids or something like that.
Well, I have a 700 square foot apartment. So who's laughing now, Joe?
And it has a podcast studio and 300 feet of it.
Hey guys, Justin here from The Edit. We didn't do a good job introing it, but here we talked to Rebecca, who's an OnlyFans content creator.
I actually wasn't sure that we had any adult content creators on our thing, so I'm pleasantly surprised that you're here. I had a handful of questions for you, but I'll start with the one that is most selfishly interesting to me since I'm making a video on OnlyFans. What is your experience on OnlyFans? And from that, what do you think the psychology of someone who subscribes to OnlyFans, pays for the photos, is compared to someone who might just go to whatever website, some porn website?
Yeah. Well, I think as you mentioned in your last conversation about it, it's definitely about the connection. Like it's not just paying to see adult content. It's partly being able to talk to the creator directly. And it's also the feeling like you're getting some kind of special access to someone's life. Like I post on social media to promote my OnlyFans. So I do reveal stuff about my life there, but on OnlyFans, it's like even deeper.
Got it. So
there's more to, I guess it makes people feel also like they might be special, like they get special insider access.
And so
that's my best guess, because I don't personally subscribe to any people. So it's just kind of my guess.
Got it. So, and totally fine if you want to answer, but I sense that there are different levels of customer service that you can provide based on the size of your audience. So, I signed up for OnlyFans for this project, and some of the people, Jem Wolfe is her name, I imagine has so many people that she's probably personally incapable of responding to the messages. Are you at a level, if you're comfortable sharing, where you are still able to one-to-one respond, no virtual assistance? And if so, what is that level that you're at in terms of numbers?
Yeah. So the numbers fluctuate because so new people join, some people leave, but it's roughly around 150 subscribers. And there's probably 5 to 10 people that I talk to fairly regularly.
Got it.
And I probably could talk to more people, but they don't seem to be there for that. I think that they're happy to just consume what I share just as is.
Got it. Okay. So
can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please.
So the 5 to 10 that are getting communication with you, is that because they're hired to your patrons or donors, or is that because of the way that they interact on the platform?
That's them reaching out to me and like starting conversations, and then I respond, and then a rapport just builds, and then we kind of just go from there. And so some people I talk to every day just because we've kind of established that kind of connection. And I try to initiate conversations with more people because there's an expectation that you tip for the time.
Yeah.
Got it. So I had if you don't mind, there was a comment interaction I had with someone when we talked about OnlyFans on our podcast, and I'd love to get your take. Do you think that the people who are donating to your page or subscribe to your page, do they have aspirations of a romantic relationship with you one day, and this is like their attempt to make that happen? Or do you think they're there for something else?
I think that might be a fantasy that people have, that if you were to actually sit down and ask them, they would know that it was a fantasy, but they might sort of just let themselves think that because it's fun. Because actually OnlyFans bans any kind of discussion of in-person meetings anyway.
Oh, fascinating. So
even if I were to ask people like, oh, do you want to meet up sometime if we're in the same city? I could have my account banned if I did that.
Fascinating.
Wow. Okay, so I have so many questions. Thank you for being so game to answer these, by the way.
Thank you.
Okay, so the different tiers, and this is the business mind going in. What percentage of your income is coming from those basic level subscribers? And then what percentage roughly is coming from upsells, such as, access to this photo, video, time to speak with me?
It's about 50-50. I kind of looked through the last few months to get a sense of where the income was coming from, and it seems to be roughly 50-50.
Got it. Okay, so those upsells are obviously quite important. And one of the things, I lived in Las Vegas for a while and met just hanging out at restaurants and clubs and all the things. There was a lot of girls that worked in strip clubs. And in speaking to them, particularly in Vegas, I found that there was a real revulsion towards their clients from them, that they kept secret while they were dancing. But if you found them in a candid moment, they would say, I do not like or respect and have multiple fake names to feel like I am separate from these people. I'm curious if any of that carries to OnlyFans, or perhaps if the barrier of feeling safer behind the computer, it makes it such that you can have a relationship that you respect, like, and enjoy these people's company.
I definitely relate to what you just shared, like what those women shared with you, in the sense that there can be times where I have a lot of revulsion towards the customer, and that I experienced both when I was escorting and now that I'm doing OnlyFans. And it's unfortunate because I think a lot of it is just because of the way these dynamics develop. Because I do have customers currently, and I had clients before when I was doing in-person work, where I genuinely really liked them as people, and the time spent together was good. And I would say that it was positive. But there are these kind of, like, there can be an animosity between sex workers and clients that clients aren't generally aware of.
Fascinating. I have so many questions. So if you want to hop in.
Go ahead.
So, and this is, I'm sure, probably something you hear all the time. If you'd hopped on and Justin didn't tell me who you were, I would not guess that this is someone who has an OnlyFans account and a history as an escort. And I'm sure you hear that all the time. So one of the things that I saw again in Las Vegas is that it seemed a bit more obvious in Vegas, quite frankly, who was who. But when I spoke to people and found out more about their stories, they often came from some sort of a broken home, that their family was not present in some meaningful way. And though they didn't always trace the line, it seemed that was overrepresented in that particular line of work. You obviously are very comfortable speaking about this, so I'm very curious if you find that, is there a wounding that leads to sex work, or is that just a bad stereotype that people have about it and that needs to go away?
I think it is definitely a stereotype, and I think it's one of these myths that keeps getting perpetuated. And I think part of that is because there definitely are people in the sex industry that have serious wounding and issues and sad stories and things like that. And then people latch onto that. But if you were to go ask a bunch of dentists or engineers, I'm sure you'd find that as well, you know?
Totally. Okay, so that's not your experience in the industry. Just to be clear, that what do you think then the other motivations, of course, financial is one for you in your case to get into this line of work would be?
The two strongest motivators for me, and also what I've observed in all the different people that I've met over the years, for me, even more than money, it's the flexibility. So when I started escorting, I was a full-time student, and I could make all the money that I needed to take care of myself by just working 1 or 2 days a week. And that could be any time and any day, just whenever I wanted to. And then if I was on summer break or something, you know, I could go and work in different cities. And so it was also a way to travel. So there was just like a flexibility and an independence combined with how much money there could be, you know, because at the time when I started escorting, I was 19. So any other job that I could have done part-time would just not have paid me enough to be able to live on. Got it.
And if you don't mind, how old are you now? And again, but
34.
if you don't want to answer any of my questions, please just say so, because I'm going to be like, how old are you? Is that okay? Did you have one?
No. Well, my question is, are you full-time on OnlyFans now?
I am now. Well, OnlyFans is the only thing I'm doing right now, but I would not say that I'm putting in full-time hours at all. Like, it's a part-time in terms of time investment. I was working at a mainstream job before the pandemic, and then I was kind of pushed out of that when, like a lot of people.
Got it. And how does one grow an OnlyFans? Like, do you mostly, is it through Instagram, or what is it? How do you get in touch with new people? How do people find out about you?
Yeah, so OnlyFans creators are entirely responsible for driving traffic to their page, because there's no kind of search feature within OnlyFans. So people tend to use Instagram, Twitter, Reddit. I think those are the main ones. Yeah. And I only focus on Twitter. And I think if I was more motivated, I would be trying to expand to other social media platforms. But I'm just it's kind of exhausting to spend that much time on the internet.
Sure. And then Chelsea, that's actually how Reddit was the one that we used to grow. And in terms of honest but potentially hurtful feedback, Reddit is a really good place to go get it. So I remember posting some of my first blog posts and just getting chewed up in the comments. Be like, okay, welcome to the internet. This is not going to be the cakewalk the whole time.
Yeah, I feel that.
Got it. Okay, so we talked about the business a little bit. We talked about the things. My question for you is there anything, because I want to give you a chance to platform yourself, speak. Is there anything that we haven't asked you that you feel is important in terms of stigma or business or anything that we haven't really gotten to?
I think that the most important message that I have, or the thing that I don't get an opportunity to talk about enough, is just the fact that sex work is work, and the work part is very important. And what I mean by that is that we don't have the same protections and rights as other workers in other industries, because, well, all kinds of sex work are highly stigmatized, some more so than others. And then some forms of sex work are criminalized, which really puts us at risk. And so something that really frustrates me is just how deeply the stigma is ingrained in our society, to the point that it's like we as a culture don't even care that we're increasing the risk of harm to sex workers, because we just don't want to deal with figuring out how to decriminalize it in a way that makes sense. And I find that really hurtful. Like, it hurts to live in a culture that sort of devalues my actual life as a human being.
And other than decriminalization, are there any concrete policies or things that you think would remedy that?
It really is, decrim is like the main thing that I think that would help.
And so for you, right now, obviously OnlyFans is decriminalized. So is that your entire now source of income? And do you feel with this new wave of not only decriminalization of OnlyFans, but it seems like a much more widespread acceptance, is that starting to make you feel better about some of the things that you described as being very upsetting, where you're not feeling valued?
I don't know that I guess maybe OnlyFans is becoming a bit less stigmatized, because I am hearing about it, like in culture, like, it's referenced by Cardi B and things, I hear it happening, I see it. But what I encounter a lot is this weird distinctions that people make between different kinds of sex work. So I'll hear, or I'll see a lot of things like, oh, OnlyFans isn't real sex work, or like porn, like solo porn doesn't really count because you're not a whore, like you're not a prostitute, things like that. And so I kind of feel like it's important for us to keep a united front. And that's why I really push using the term sex worker, whether or not we're talking about a dancer or a porn performer or an escort. Because otherwise we're just going to throw a whole group of people under the bus, like people doing prostitution, which is like at the low, like the bottom of the hierarchy.
Yeah.
I imagine that's exactly what people who do OnlyFans are going to want to do, though. Like, you know what I mean?
Meaning?
If you're a girl, let's say you were an Instagram
yourself.
model or a Disney actress, and now you're on OnlyFans, I imagine they're going to do everything they can to say OnlyFans is like being an Instagram model, and it's nothing like being a prostitute. Like, they're going to try hard to draw that line, I think.
I think that's a smart intuition. Is that what you've seen?
Yeah, I see a lot of that. And that's something really frustrating in our community. So if you dig a little deeper into this, you'll find that there's something that we call the whorarchy.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So like at the very bottom, it's prostitution. And so, and part of this is that people want to make themselves feel better about what they're doing. So like if a girl is filming herself masturbate and then selling that to people, then she can say to herself, well, at least I'm not a prostitute, things. So, and then I'll see, and people in porn do that as well. I've seen people make comments like, oh, I work in film and like just talk about all the ways in which it's so different to separate themselves from that low that low group that they don't want to be associated with.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I mean, I certainly feel that. I was raised in this culture. I totally can intuit the order of the hierarchy. One of the things that I'm curious about is because I'm sure that one of the reasons that people on OnlyFans separate themselves into the upper tiers of the hierarchy, if you will, is for their personal romantic relationships. Because if I think of men, I think there's probably a larger group of men that would be okay with their girlfriend or future wife taking lewd photos, fewer with nude photos, fewer with video, all the way down to prostitution. So I'm curious, in your life, have you had difficulty in your relationships because of this? Something you bring up right away so that you're screening people and they're understanding? How have you, what effects have you seen and how have you dealt with it?
I think that your intuition is right, that if someone is just selling like nude photos or something, it's sort of comforting to know that a partner would likely be more comfortable with that than with other types of sex work. In my own experience, I haven't really had difficulty with dating, but I've been very picky and selective to make sure that the kind of person that I would be dating would be okay with that, or that I would be able to have that kind of conversation. But it's really stressful. Like when I've tried dating, it's always in the back of my mind that, okay, this is going to be a thing that I have to bring up. When do I bring it up? How do I bring it up? Even if I think they're going to be open-minded, the initial reaction might be so surprising that it could be really uncomfortable. And then I've heard a lot, and so I've been fortunate in that I've made good selections, I guess, in how I tell people, and so it hasn't negatively impacted the relationships. But I've heard some really, really heartbreaking stories, especially around, like in relationships, the word whore will be thrown around in an argument, like just really cruel, where someone will kind of act like it's okay, but then in a fight they'll bring it up like an insult.
It's interesting because as I'm thinking through this, it seems like culturally, biologically, that there's expectations of a man. So a man is supposed to be strong, provide, emotionally stable, and a woman is supposed to be chaste, have a limited sexual history, etc. And you mentioned the arguments. That's what's coming from both sides, right? It's you're not a man, and also it sounds like you don't qualify as a good woman is one of the things that is being said. So is that something that you're conscious of? Are you just a less judgmental person all around, is I guess what I'm asking? Do you find that you're less likely to put people down for all sorts of different things? Yeah,
I mean, I try really hard to be as non-judgmental as possible.
So I'm thinking of the iDubbbz video. I don't know if you know who iDubbbz is. He's a YouTuber who's it came out that his girlfriend was making an OnlyFans selling lewds, and I suppose in the upsells nudes. I'm not totally certain. And the internet went berserk, called him a simp, was very upset that their chosen content creator was dating an OnlyFans girl. And in reflecting on how I might feel and how the comments rather were characterizing him, there's a sense that if your girlfriend does that there's nothing left that's special for you. And so in your relationships, do you carve out something that is special for the people that you're dating that is unique? Or do you think that idea of even having something that is special, that is singular, is outdated and has nothing to do with real connection and love?
So for me personally, I didn't have any kinds of, there aren't things that I separate out as like, oh, I'll only do this with my partner, and I won't do it at work. But I think that part of that, or what's important is that being at work isn't the same as being with my partner. Like if I'm with my partner, we can communicate about what each of us wants. And so like if I didn't want to do something sexual, I just wouldn't, or we would work up to it or whatever, just the way you normally would in a relationship. But at work, it would be like, okay, I don't feel like it, but this is my job, or I'll figure out a way to get into it. And like, I'm not relating to a customer the way that I would to a partner. So it just doesn't feel the same. Even if I really like a client, it's just not the same kind of dynamic.
It's so one of the things, and I guess I'm just kind of pinging off of my own initial reactions, is that I could see that stoking insecurity, because I think that one of the ways that men are measured, and I have felt measured in my own life, is a woman's willingness to be sexual with me and her excitedness to do all different kinds of sexual things that maybe she wouldn't have even done with a previous boyfriend, but because you're such the coolest guy in the whole wide world, she's opening that to you. So have you noticed that insecurity is something difficult to handle in your relationships with men? And if so, how do you start to handle that?
I guess I haven't personally encountered it much, but that could be, I might be a bit of a unique case there, because I've tended to seek out partners who are like in the polyamory or open relationship type of scene, just because I find that they would be more open-minded to that. And the same tools and strategies that you learn in open relationships would sort of apply. But for people, I have heard that that's an issue for other people where, like in straight relationships, like the man will feel he might feel, I don't know if he feels emasculated or just sort of like, I'm not special. Something I have encountered before is, like a girlfriend of mine told me that her partner felt really insecure about his ability to provide financially. So she would have clients that would want to fly her to Europe and spoil her, and they were very wealthy and things like that. And then he's like, working kind of a regular job, and just couldn't do that. So he felt like a kind of a loser, I guess is what she said. He felt like.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, as I'm thinking through this, I think that there are reasons that the particular insults towards women and towards men arise. And it's a control mechanism, right? You want the man to be strong and stand up for you and all these kinds of things so that you can get that behavior from him. And men say whore so that they can limit a woman's options and ensure that she doesn't have a better choice than him. I can see that instinct even arising in me if I was forced into a situation where someone that I cared deeply about was regularly hanging out with people that were wealthier, more handsome, all these different kinds of things, and then having sex with them. My thought would be, well, what do you even like about me? And I think that is an insecure thought. So God bless these guys for just for not dealing with it. I know that I would struggle with that, and certainly I've been in open relationships and have struggled with those sorts of things.
Yeah, I do. I think it is challenging. And a lot of that is just because of cultural norms around monogamy. And I don't know, like we could have a discussion about biology or culture, whatever, but it's not the norm. It's definitely not the norm. And so given that we're not raised with the kind of tools to learn how to be able to deal with that or make it work, it's definitely challenging, and it is much harder to find a partner that's willing to do that kind of work.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious if either of you disagree, because I just think you may or you may not, but I feel like people are allowed to filter for anything they want in a romantic partner as long as they're not hurtful. So like you like tall women, you like short women, you like tall men, you like short men. It's actually all fine. Like you want somebody who's got a ton of sexual experience. You want someone who's got very little sexual experience. I actually think you're allowed to have whatever standards you want, as long as you're not hurtful about telling the person that they don't meet your standards. I don't think it's wrong to say, hey, like, I just feel like based on what you've done in the past in your life, I'm not interested. No matter what in the past in your life means. Yeah. For your own romantic relationships, I think you're allowed to make that statement as long as you make it in an unhurtful way.
Yes. I think the problem becomes when people feel less than based on what somebody did in the past, and in order to recover, and we can talk about this later, in order to that shame that they feel about not stacking up then comes out as
for sure
XYZ, you're all these bad things. But yeah, I think people need to discriminate and should be allowed to discriminate intensely among any single factor that they want when it comes to who they sleep with, right? Short, tall, guy, girl, all of these are totally reasonable ways to discriminate.
Yeah, I have a sleeve tattoo. I think if a woman says, listen, you seem great, but you have a sleeve tattoo and I have a hard no sleeve tattoo dating rule, like that's not, I can't get upset at that unless they say like, and the reason is because you're, and then say a bunch of really hurtful things.
Yes.
Do you guys disagree?
I agree. Rebecca?
Yeah, I definitely think people have every right to say what they're looking for and what they're not and what their boundaries and limits are. I would wonder, I guess I would just ask someone to question what's going on underneath. And even if like we removed the sex work part from the equation and we were just to say like, okay, like if a guy just didn't want to date a woman who had slept with 300 men in the past, like why is that? I would just want someone to kind of question what's going on underneath there. Of course, they have every right to not want to.
Yeah. And I this is what I actually don't know the answer to, because I've thought of this. And like I said, I grew up in this culture, and I would probably have a reaction if I was dating someone and found that they had a history in pornography, that this would arise in me. And I've asked myself this question. I've just come up living in Las Vegas before. And what I find in myself is I can't untie what is biological, like, okay, this is sort of hardwired, ensure paternity and ensure fidelity, and what is cultural, you're not man enough if she's being satisfied by this many other people and she's not chaste in a way. And so I don't pretend to, I mean, I probably do pretend quite often, but I won't pretend right now that I have completely untied those things. But I do think those are two of the building blocks to what may be arising. And it's certainly, what I do notice is that the degree to which it's like quick and fiery and angry and frustrated and panicked is the degree to which it's an emotional reaction. Not necessarily one that I need to talk down from or change or adjust, but okay, like this is stoking some sort of inner deep feeling and not my rational brain.
Yeah, your heartbeat is a good way to tell if you're triggered or being thoughtful.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so when all that kind of stuff comes up, I just think it would be interesting and helpful if people would just sit with that. Because I think what can happen is people might just blurt out stuff or have like an automatic reaction, like they might discount a person altogether before actually maybe just sitting with it for a few days and being like, oh, all this stuff's coming up for me. What is it about? And then afterwards they might find that, I don't know, they work through some stuff and they are open to dating a person with that history. Or they might think about it and be like, no, actually I'm not. But to have like an automatic dismissal of a person when all that stuff's coming up that I think is related to a lot of cultural baggage, I guess it would be cool if people would pay more attention to that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think really the person who benefits the most is the person doing the questioning. Whether or not they decide to enter into the relationship, it's really nice to know the cultural norms that you're trying to fill with every fiber of your being and how it feels when they get violated and you don't stack up in good comparison to those. Because then you can go, okay, I'm going to buy into this thing and I'm going to play by these rules and I'm going to allow this to be an external weight on my decision making and happiness. Or you can go, you know what, I don't want this one. Like, I'm going to try to find a way to work through it. But what I did see is I tried to find a way to work through the open relationship jealousy because I was like, this is dumb. All of the reasons that I'm being told that this is a bad thing, I don't logically buy into. But I did find that it was so deeply ingrained in me after, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years of trying. I just gave up. I was like, I can't untie this from myself. So to the people who can, awesome. I have not yet been able to. Maybe one day, though. We'll see.
Yeah, that's totally fair enough. And I actually just think it's really cool that you tried, that you went there and you explored all that stuff.
Yeah. No, and it was, I don't regret it, you know? It was not a bad thing to have done.
Learn what kind of relationships don't work for you.
Yeah. So I know we can't promote any OnlyFans on here. So if you'd like to, do you want to shout out your Instagram or Twitter?
Yeah, actually, probably my Twitter is better. So it's Rebecca Madison _
Rebecca Madison _ Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. It's been super fascinating. And I've got a lot of stuff to think about myself. Because what you are talking about is, I actually don't think it's subtle. I think we're talking about like the reinvention of society because it's something as fundamental as the basis of male-female relationships, what is acceptable, what is unacceptable. And if those stigmas change, the entire world changes, right? Like the way that families are structured can change. And so I don't know that it's right, wrong, good, bad, but I do see it moving in this direction. And I think it has a lot of implications for the world that we might be living in 20 years from now. So thank you for inspiring me to reflect on this.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for the opportunity. It was nice to meet you all.
Awesome. Okay. We're here. We're back. Headphoneless.
Yeah. So something I didn't want to keep her for a conversation that was going to be long and not have to do with that. But it reminds me of, I don't know what's biology, what's culture in terms of jealousy. But we've talked about this before off the podcast. The things you hear 1,000 times when you're growing up, that's what you believe. And like no amount of facts or attempts to change your mind will really work, with rare exception, right? But that's why the religion you are is almost always the religion of your parents. When you're Jewish, almost always your parents are Jewish. When you're Christian, sometimes you go atheist, but very, very, very rarely will you just be like, oh, I prefer to be Muslim, but I'm from a Christian family. You know what I mean? It reminds me a lot, because you're like, oh, the shame, the jealousy. It reminds me of the same thing in terms of these police shootings where people will try to quote data and say, well, if you look at the data, just as many white people get killed as black people. And if you look at it, it skews very similarly to who the I think it's the FBI, is saying is committing violent crimes. It's so unpersuasive to someone who has heard since they were growing up, the police are coming for you. They're particularly against you because of your skin, and they're going to kill you for no reason. If you hear that growing up over and over and over in the same way you hear that your religion is correct, of course, a spreadsheet from the FBI isn't going to change your mind. And that's just what that made me think of. Is like, yeah, if your culture tells you over and over and over again that you shouldn't date a woman unless she's had a certain amount of sexual partners or less, and you hear it over and over and over again growing up, nothing is good. This podcast isn't going to change your mind. Data's not going to change your mind. Thinking about it after you read a book, like, yeah, it's so hard to shake that stuff if you get it messaged to you when you're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and beyond that, I do think there's a degree to which trying to ensure paternity and guarding against promiscuity is very likely hardwired into particularly the male brain, because you can't be certain of paternity, right? So all this obsession over virginity in the Middle Ages, it did not come out of nowhere.
Oh yeah, but so I guess what I'm saying is you can
culture. Yeah,
well, you can argue that culture's got value. I think in the same way Jordan Peterson argues, like, you think the government's all shitty because you're 16 years old, but trust me, it's set up this way because this is what evolved to be successful. So maybe culture has a purpose. But what I'm saying is we were kind of talking about like, well, the biology's hardwired. You can't shake that, but you can shake the culture. And I'm saying
not really.
It's really hard to shake culture.
Oh, that's what I found. That was exactly my point.
But I'm saying no matter where you're attributing it to, if you heard, and some people will, but if you heard, for instance, that it was the most important thing in your partner was that they were a virgin, guy or girl.
Yeah.
That if the person is unclean, they are unworthy of your love. And you heard it every single day from all the people you admire, by the way, all the adults in your life, your parents, this and that. And it was just told to you every single day. By the time you got to be 18, most everyone would feel that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like no amount of reading or listening to podcasts would change at least half of people.
Most people would not change.
From going, no, virgin. I'm positive of this. I'm positive of this because I heard it every day when I was forming my opinions as a child.
Yeah.
So I think it's obviously biology is the hardest thing to shake, but culture, I'm realizing, isn't this flippant thing you can overcome with your front brain.
Yeah, but I mean, I've tried in various areas of my life, and it was this naive, not totally, it was kind of a blank slate idea that I could think my way to what logically the best way to live was, what logically ought to make me upset with someone and shouldn't make me upset in all sorts of different areas of life. And that by just reinforcing that and thinking it, that I would change my actual reaction. And in the last several years, I've learned to accept at some level some of the things that I've tried to change about myself and go, no, that is going to be how I feel. It doesn't mean that I need to scream, rage, or express these emotions in any sort of destructive way, but that I then need to plan a life around this piece of myself that is relatively fixed.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to be adjusting this personally. And that doesn't mean that I get to foist these ideals onto other people. Like, if there's a new generation that isn't raised with the same cultural baggage that I had when I was raised in the 90s, God, that's amazing for them. Yeah. But I'm not necessarily going to get rid of mine because I have a history, and they're in there. You know?
No, and I think it's similarly, because we've talked about like, what's the solution to today's problems? Is it based on race? Is it based on socioeconomics? Is it based on, and I think the one thing that I guess people should appreciate is like, even if you think the data lines up such that it's not actually skewing racist in terms of police brutality, like whatever your belief on that is, if someone grew up hearing that it was, your data isn't going to persuade them. And to the effect that you think they're dumb for that, that's how everyone finds their religion. So like, just I guess have some empathy for people who are like, I'm being gunned down and hunted in the streets. And you're like, no, look at this pie chart. It's like, listen, your pie chart might be right. It might be wrong. But the person feels that way for the exact same way that religious people find their religion, and you find what you're looking for in a sexual partner. Exactly. Why you think your country's the best country.
Yeah.
And some people are listening to this and going, well, I'm an atheist and I don't think my country's the best. So some people can not think this. And you're right. And some people, by the way, grow up in this culture but don't think this. So you'll find Black Americans saying that it's not necessarily racism that's leading to all of this police
overrepresentation and
But when you find someone who does think that, I'm just saying, like, this is why it's the exact same. This culture, when you hear it from the time you're a child, is impossible to shake with hearing some numbers from CNN or Fox News or whatever. So basically just have empathy for people when you're discussing with them when they disagree with you.
Yeah, we talked to Brett Weinstein about this, and the thing that I think we agreed on is that rapport is the most important thing. Feeling that someone is not there to shake you, hurt you, disrupt your most deeply held beliefs, but is a friend is super important. There was that guy who disrobed several KKK members, the black journalist, I believe, that was on the Joe Rogan podcast. And he did it not by telling them and showing them statistics about black people, but by slowly over time signaling through his behavior and his actions that he was a friend. And it was only with that rapport that he was able to penetrate that shell of belief that kept anybody else out. And all the statistics, I mean, statistics bounce off of that shell, you know, nobody cares. Yes, and we've talked about this, but so many of our beliefs about things that we have really, if you're not a climate scientist and you have a strong opinion about global warming, I think you need to pause and realize that that is based on signals of authority and frequency that you've heard something. It is not based, unless you are a climate scientist who has read these papers or written them yourself, on any sort of deep understanding that we ought to base things off. It's based off of a majority rule of your insular community. And maybe that insular community is the 97% of scientists or 93 that are quoted. But quite frankly, even when people bring that statistic up, I say 93% of who? Just to point out that they have no idea. They heard that number on the news somewhere and have a really, really like heartfelt belief about this because they've seen a couple of pieces of anecdotal evidence and frequency. That's what I've seen. Frequency is everything, especially when you're little.
Dude, you just brought in some nice transitions for two topics. Do you want to go New York shooting and how the news covers things, or do you want to talk about the CDC?
I'm totally yours.
Okay. Let's talk about the 6% number. So this went pretty viral. CDC released a report, 6% of COVID deaths. Should I say MOVID? How do I not get demonetized for this?
We don't get demonetized anymore for COVID.
The Schmirus. 6% of the Schmirus does not have comorbidities, which means 94% of the people who died of COVID also had hypertension, a heart attack, pneumonia, respiratory failure. Some people are latching onto that and saying that basically someone's already having a heart attack, they happen to have COVID, so they get marked as a COVID death to run the numbers up.
Yeah.
Other people, I think, are saying, which sounds right, pneumonia can be caused by COVID. Respiratory failure can be caused by... So you wind up
dying with a comorbidity, even though it was like, I wasn't going to get pneumonia.
You didn't have pneumonia. You get COVID, then you get pneumonia, then you die, and now you have a comorbidity. But if you hadn't gotten COVID, you wouldn't get pneumonia. I think the truth probably lays somewhere in the middle, which is to say 100% of these deaths are not COVID. Someone had a heart attack and happened to have COVID, but also it makes total sense upon reflection that you would be healthy, get COVID, then have respiratory failure. And when you die, they say cause of death, COVID, cause of death, respiratory failure, but it's caused by the COVID.
Well, there's a complete lack of context because it occurs to me that I don't know the comorbidities associated with brain cancer. Right? Because if you get brain cancer, you might die with 3 comorbidities because it screws up all of your other systems.
Yeah, you'd go through chemo and then you'd die of a cold.
Yes. And so the comorbidity thing, again, I don't know. Here's my point. I don't know what to make of it. I have no context. I have no training in this, and I have nothing to compare it to.
Well, this was going to be my number one takeaway is if you saw that 6% thing and are now convinced COVID's completely fake, I would tell you to pause. If you saw that 6% and said, this has got to be bogus, and I'm going to dig until I find out why, pause. Just realize you started with your conclusion and none of us are really fully understanding, and it's somewhere in the middle. But I did find a stat that no one is talking about that I did find interesting because I went straight to the CDC report because I don't like going to the news. And I'm going to read it. 4,800 of the deaths, not just the no comorbidity deaths, all COVID related deaths, 4,800 are people under 44 years old. So that's even if you had the heart attack or you had the whatever it is and you happen to have COVID, you're in that number, right? So this is like the highest number we could get. Unless you're going to say that all the numbers are bunk because our way of capturing data is garbage, right? Sure. But so 4,800 people under 44 have died in the US total. If you go to under 54 years old, 13,000 people total. 54 from age 0 to 54. 40,000 people in 2019 died in car accidents. 4 million people in the US were injured in car accidents. It seems to me we would never remove all cars to prevent 40,000 deaths a year, right? No one would ever run with this. Hey, we're just going to get rid of cars. We're going to go to bicycles as in the US. It seems very surprising that people are still arguing that we need to further shut down. And I know some of these people will say that the numbers are low because we've shut down. I personally, it seems like the data is pointing towards let people make their own decisions. Let people see the data. If you have diabetes, if you're obese, you should probably be really careful. If you're 22 with no prior health things, you might die from COVID. But if you want to go to the gym or eat in a restaurant, I think you should have the right to. It seems like, especially in the land of the free, where COVID's already terribly not under control, that it's time to just go, okay, personal responsibility, personal choice, deal with this as you think. And to the extent that your recklessness kills your own grandparents, like, that's on you. And if your grandparents think you're reckless and they tell you you can't come over, respect it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, obviously. So, and I'll play devil's advocate because my instinct I think lines up with you, but I will play the other side since there's no one here to do so. You're not just going to kill your own grandparents. You're going to, it doesn't follow familiar lines. It's very easy to spread. What I do think you nailed is that we need to contextualize this, compare to other things that kill people, and try to find a way. Okay, so we have speed limits with cars. We wear seatbelts. We do mitigate these things, but we find that the benefit of being able to commute in a vehicle is worth 4 million injuries and 40,000 deaths a year.
Well, and the death toll of being shut down is not zero, by the way, because it leads to increased poverty, joblessness, and also increased depression. And also people who are sick aren't going to hospitals because they're so scared of COVID that they're just getting sick from other stuff and dying from other stuff. So
and so when I talk to you,
no, I know you're going to play devil's advocate. So we're not.
I'll agree with you, and I'll go, and then we'll scream up and down about how we want to go outside.
Well, no, but here's what I'm saying though. Like, my grandpa has had heart attacks. Is older, and I love him to death. I don't want him to die. I think that at some point though, it has to be about him being cautious and me being cautious with him. So like, I'm going to my sister's wedding. It was supposed to be 100 people. 7 people are going. For the 2 weeks prior, I'm going to stop doing things that I think will give me a chance to get COVID, or I'm going to become more cautious because I'm going to see my parents, and they're not, in their 30s. So I think that that's a very reasonable way to handle this, is not flippantly, but is with the sense that if you, who aren't going to go see your parents, want to go to a restaurant every day next week, my responsibility as your friend is to say, hey, let's do phone calls and not hang out, because I'm going to go see my parents and they're not 54 or younger. So they are at risk. I'm going to go see my grandpa. So for 2 weeks prior, I'm going to be very, very careful in my home. And the day before I see him, I'll go get a test. If it shows up positive, I'll call him and say, I love you so much, I can't come see you. You know what I'm saying? It's not to disrespect that the virus exists, but I think there's a way to be thoughtful that's not shutting down the entire country, which is not costless either. I guess that's my point.
I agree with you. I will represent the other side. One, in terms of context, we haven't talked about long-term ramifications of this. So looking at the number of deaths might not at all address the main issue of coronavirus. That's why we need more than this. But what I will say is you can imagine 2 different worlds. There's a pandemic in one world and it kills 0.000000001% of people. It's widely viral. It's going to get through everything. And you can imagine a world where there is a pandemic of a deadly disease that you continue to exist. And we might call that deadly disease the common cold, right?
Sure.
And we move through life and it doesn't have a vaccine and we're never going to get there. It does kill people. And it kills people. You can also, and it mostly kills old people. It's the cold. And the infirm and people who've been on chemo and all sorts of things. You can imagine another world with a virus that is just as viral, but has a kill rate of 10% or 15 or 20%.
Call it Ebola or something.
And you got to shut down and you have to be draconian. And what I would encourage the people making decisions or advocating in any sort of platform to do is to try to find out which of those worlds we live in by diving into the data.
Yeah, and I think
not go, if there's a virus we can't, or there's a virus we must.
I think when we didn't have any data, it made sense to shut down. Just go, we don't know what this is. We know it's super viral. We don't understand the consequences of this. Let's be cautious. But it seems like as new information comes out, we should adjust our plan. And I guess I don't see that. I live in California. I see our governor go up and give a speech, and it's about a very slow strategy to open up with extreme caution, as if we still don't know anything about the virus. And maybe I just don't understand the data I'm looking at. Maybe when I see 4,800 deaths for people 44 and under, I should realize that that's a huge deal.
Well, I think
but it seems like they're not adjusting. No one's come out and been like, we were super cautious and we're glad we were cautious. We're going to be less cautious because we've seen the CDC data. You know what I'm saying? The governor, I've never seen the governor give a speech like that.
Yes. And so, well, the other thing, I don't think that the CDC data is necessarily, and again, playing devil's advocate, influencing the advisors that he has around him who are very close to the data, who didn't need this to be released, who have developed their opinions incrementally, as opposed to, oh, new CDC data came out, let's double back and reverse everything. What I do think seems plausible, if not very likely, is that reactions to the coronavirus by government are very political. And I think you can predict someone's political allegiance with a high degree of certainty
based on how they react to what I just said
of coronavirus. And I think that is because, and we've seen this with regards to protests and riots and also coronavirus, the way that coronavirus unfolds has a noticeable effect on the polls of who will become the U.S.'s next president. For those of you not in the U.S., sorry. I know that this can get boring, but that is, I think that's what drives it, a lot of it. And so I think you're going to see very different potentially, depending on who wins, very different approaches to coronavirus the second week of November, because a lot of it has to do with
You think there'll be a switch where how people
I think right now, what really drives policy about coronavirus is not a concern for life.
You think it's the election?
Dude, there's so many things in America that we don't care about life.
Yeah.
We don't care. I mean, like we will blatantly and flagrantly throw it away to go invade Iraq or under the pretense of WMDs, and so many people in our Senate had voted for it. We don't care about the data. We didn't want to hear what the UN had to say. And now we care about the data. To me, it seems that this is, if not consciously, then subconsciously political in its nature. And I think that once that incentive goes away, because the election has been decided, so hopefully it's been decided in the second week of November, you'll see a different approach to coronavirus, which is less political, because now there's 4 years and you just got to give that fight up and fight them again.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, we'll see.
Also, I guess I see a lot, and maybe this could just be the vocal minority on both sides, to be fair, but I see a lot of people talking about how they're, anti-maskers, we should do nothing, this is a hoax. And I see a lot of people saying, like, we have to take this incredibly seriously and do everything we can to get no new COVID cases ever. And I guess I don't see a lot of people just saying, like, can we treat this like it's serious, but also like we have to live our lives around it because it's going to be around for a while and we've overreacted prior. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not an anti-masker. I want to look at the validity of masks. I want to just have a study done to show me how effective they are. If they're effective, I'm all for it. I don't mind breathing through a cloth. You know what I mean? And funny enough, I feel like the fact that I'm at all saying that we should treat the virus like cars, in the sense that cars kill people, but we keep them around, is going to make me painted like an anti-masker. Because if you aren't on towing the line for being super left, then that makes you like far right. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
The hill that I feel comfortable standing with you on even here is, if you don't put this into context, and that means context includes compared to other things that kill people and how we address those. That means compared to different age groups. It also means context of deaths aren't injuries, aren't long-term things. Like it seems like people just have a way that they want this thing to break.
Yeah.
And then they read, I think that's what we've been saying, is like, for political, personal, or confirmation bias reasons, people have decided which way they want this thing to break. And there's not a lot of, okay, let's pretend that I was agnostic and I just wanted to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Now let's look at all the data and ask all the questions that I would need to ask if I were really trying to like just do the rightest thing I could do. That is a rare thing, and it's not what I engage in on a day-to-day basis. On day-to-day, you know me, I complain that I can't go outside, and I just get angry that I can't do the things I want to do.
I don't think you would if you thought that it was I think that's implicitly in the fact that you don't think it's gonna kill you.
No, it's because I'm not on a camera. It's because the way that we communicate as friends is not the way that we communicate when we know that we're presenting ideas to a larger community.
Sure.
But I think every single group of people, the way that you speak to your friend is going to just be less guarded, concerned. You're going to say things that you don't mean in order to get a laugh. You're just going to complain because you can commiserate over how this is such a pain.
Yeah.
And you would never do that in a larger group format. So that's the difference that I see in myself when we're here and when you and I walk around and I'm just like, I want to go. I don't want to do this. I want the spa to open. I just won't care. I will get coronavirus if I can go to the sauna.
Yeah.
Like, do I really mean that? Maybe.
I feel like for myself, at least, I started on a lot of these issues like very, very hard in agreement with the more liberal side of things. And then I like slowly peel my way back to the middle. So like, for instance, when we were talking about how the military had been sent into Portland, I was like, this is insane. This is fascism. This is Nazi Germany. Completely unacceptable. Then our neighborhood got destroyed by the riots and National Guard got sent in. And I was like, thank God you're here. Yesterday, my building was set on fire.
Well, no, you're getting the order reversed, actually.
Really?
Yeah. They came here first.
No.
100%.
Really?
100 by months. You'd forgotten about the National Guard.
Interesting. Maybe it's because they were unmarked versus marked?
It was because they were unmarked and you read an article on Reddit and you got stoked up into a fury and you forgot your lived experience. And then you watched Brett Weinstein and you'd completely changed your opinion, which is to say you were never in Portland. Yet you had two strong opinions about Portland and forgot why you had it.
This is why I went straight to the CDC. Someone sent me an article. I don't even know if it was by Fox or CNN, but I was just like, no, I can't.
Yeah, that's a good demonstration. And you just did what everybody does, and I do, which is like, I don't know why I hold the opinions that I hold. I think I know why I held them, but really it was just because I heard a thing that I identified with.
Do you want to talk about media manipulation, the article you sent me today?
No, I think we've beaten that to death. If you want to, I can.
No, I just thought it was interesting.
Got it. So I have other things that are not at all related. I'll take it back. And if you want to stay on this topic, feel free.
I thought it was mildly interesting, but
okay, I'll tell you. Yeah, I feel like I constantly bludgeon the news, yet continue. I feel like an abusive or the abused party in a couple who was like, he's so bad to me, and then it's just constantly going back, and at some point I have to go, okay, I am not going to do this anymore. I will control my own behavior. But I was looking at some of the news that was coming out. There's been violent weekends in Chicago and New York. And I read just one article about the New Yorkers. I was like, what's going on over there? And you can cut the statistics a number of ways. Long story short, crime is tremendously down over the 10 and 30 year periods. It is up over the 2-year period, which is to say compared to last year by like 50 to 100% when you're talking about gun violence and gun deaths. So gun shootings are up like 200% in New York City. But luckily, they hasn't resulted in 200% more deaths, like 50% more deaths. Crime in other areas is widely down, rape, etc. So you go, is crime up or down in New York? Well, of course, that's a complicated mixed bag to start with. But in any event, I'm reading this article that is about the spree of gun crime in New York that had a weekend full of shootings. And it occurred to me, because I've been reading the news, that there was no mention of race or skin color at any point in this article. And this was a longer article. And I'm so used to seeing black, white, like these are critical things to know about a circumstance.
Sure, the race of the victim, the race of the person who did the shooting.
And it's completely not there. And there's literally a suspect at large that is in there. Suspect is 170 pounds, 6 feet tall. Anything else? You know, like noticeably absent.
Yeah.
And my thought, this was one article by ABC News, I went, these race relations are being stoked to a fever pitch war. Like this is conspicuously absent here, such that I can only determine, ABC, when I read your next article about a white cop who killed a black man, that you are not interested in race, with the exception of the times where it causes really serious racial tension and potentially riots. And it made me very angry at the news to read this. Now, it's a hot take because I haven't stepped back and compared multiple articles. This could have just been, this is why I kind of didn't want to talk about it. But I did send it to you because I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, no, we don't have to go deep in it. I just thought it was interesting. There was, what was the stat? 6 people dead, 50 injured or something? 6 shooters. I forget exactly what it was, but it's like, it's a lot of people. A lot of shootings are happening in New York over one weekend. Let me see if I can get the data. It was 51 victims, 6 dead in a weekend of shootings. But of course,
all this needs context. It needs to be compared to other weekends, previous times and previous years.
Oh yeah. Like, all I thought was interesting was the absence of any form of mention of the race of the victim and the race of the shooter. That's all I thought was interesting. We don't have to beat it to death, but it was just it made me realize how much the news shapes the narrative, I guess. You know, how much the feelings that we have about the events unfolding we get told what to feel and then we feel it because they're good at their job. You know what I mean? And I don't think that the answer is watch the news with a critical eye. I think to your point, it's like, if you don't trust it, unplug from it.
Yeah, but for you guys, I go back and
because we have a pod. Well, honestly, if I didn't watch the news, I wouldn't have much to talk about.
Yeah. So let's take a hard turn here. Sure. Bella Thorne. Her name has come up. She's become famous in OnlyFans circles, and I, as an OnlyFans user, am livid. No, so if you don't know the Bella Thorne saga, I actually don't know who she is. She is a famous person.
I think she was a Disney star
who joined OnlyFans and got $1 million worth of subscriptions in her first day, and it was, I believe, occur monthly. So she made quite a bit of money. And then I tried to find them. I only found examples. They could have been doctored. Sent photos out to people and implied that they were nude. And there was an example of someone asking, are these full nude? And she said, yes, no clothes. She charged $200 for this. It was behind a paywall. And when people clicked, it wasn't a full nude. This caused...
technically accurate, right? No clothes. What she did was waist up and she covered herself, I think. So it was like letter of the law, honest.
Yeah, something like that. But again, it was... so she does that. And then a lot of people hit their credit cards and go, $200. I did not get the product that I was promised or signaled. And this would be false advertising in any other regulated industry. OnlyFans sees this, can't handle all of it. Their servers get shut down because they've got so many requests. And they then put a limit on the amount of tips that women can receive. Well, anyone can receive on OnlyFans. It tends to be women. For pictures, and it's, I believe, $50 or $100. They're still adjusting all of these things, but there was an outcry on Twitter of OnlyFans sex workers who were upset with Bella Thorne, and Bella Thorne apologized. I did not need to do this. I was only trying to bring more attention. You can read the whole thing. She apologized to the OnlyFans sex workers, and I wish I'd asked Rebecca when we had her what was conspicuously absent, in my opinion, and I read 7 articles, was any mention of the customers who had been lied to, who had to go to get their credit card money back, some of whom might still be having processing issues. It was, this is my income. And I'm so sorry for affecting your income. It's like, that was somebody's income too, Bella.
Yeah.
That was somebody's income. The money, $200 that was sent to you.
From them, yeah.
And so I'm sad that maybe we'll have her back on sometime. Didn't ask this about Rebecca. What I saw was not implying that she feels this way, a social media and Bella Thorne level lack of concern or respect for the men that were buying these photos. I saw no outcry for an apology. It was not amplified in any of the media sources. And I do see in the media, there appears to be a complete openness and a defense of and a wanting to move towards increased liberality with regards to sex work, which I'm not at all against. But I think you need to respect the customer as much as you're going to respect the provider if you're going to live in that world. And I don't see that. That has not been my experience, at least in this one incident. And I don't...
No, I think that's fair. I mean, if I had to track just the recent trend, I'm not going to pretend that this is the history of the world, but the recent trend, it seems to be a push towards not shaming people for creating OnlyFans content, but totally cool to just shit on simps. You know what I mean? So it's like, we got to respect the OnlyFans people. This is how they make their living. It's their body. It's their right to do whatever they want. This person paying them, though, total chump loser. Let's take a dump on them. You know what I mean? That's the trend I see. I don't see people really standing up in large numbers, at least, and saying like, hey, hold on.
Simp is a bad word.
Simp
is a 4-letter word.
That's that guy's money. And he can do whatever he wants with it. And he wants to support this person and form this online relationship. And that is no worse than you buying your designer clothes. It's his money, his right. Stop shaming him. I've never seen anyone make that message.
Well, let's make simp a slur. Why? Simp is a slur. It's only used about men. I don't know why. I mean, you could imagine a world where that was a 4-letter word that was not allowed to be said because it degraded men.
Sure. And I'm not even sitting here saying what I think should or shouldn't happen, but just what I see is the defense of the creator in terms of like, it's getting less and less appropriate to shame an OnlyFans creator. And it's definitely does not seem to be getting extended to the people that are
this is
paying them.
So I do believe that there's a large degree of not Rawlsian veil of ignorance morality that is behind these movements towards being kind to people. There is a wielding of power to defend oneself and advance your group's position in the world. And in this case, obviously, and I don't fault them at all. Like if you're an OnlyFans and that's your job, I don't expect you to advocate for every other person on the planet. Like you got to protect yourself and say, hey, you've affected my income with your crappy lying behavior. But I do think that I just try to recognize and understand, like, look, people are not being moral beacons when they self-advocate, but doing it in the name of liberality, and we have to become more open and accepting. If you're saying that, but you're not applying it to other people, then that's not what you're doing. You're self-advocating, which is totally cool. I have a video where I'm up there so upset that somebody copyright struck my YouTube video. We can't do this, but like, that's just me self-advocating. That's not me solving the problems of the world or wanting this to be a fairer system. And I totally understand that that's how process or improvements are made. But there's a twinge of self-righteousness, and this is a moral crusade, which I really don't think is true. It's self-advocacy by groups that band together to advance their interests, which is totally cool. Just they don't care about the customer.
They just don't care about everyone. Sure.
So this is slightly related. I listened to a podcast. Our friend Paul recommended it. I don't know how to say his name. Attia talked to a male therapist guy. His name is Real or Real. I don't know how you.
I think it's Peter Attia.
It's one of the recent ones, and if you want to listen to it, it's interesting. He talks a lot about men, and he talks about covert depression, which I thought was quite interesting. So if you take the Big 5 personality trait study that Jordan Peterson is big on, and you look at the differences between men and women, you'll see that women test higher for trait neuroticism, which is associated with depression, and women are often more treated for depression than men. He says that men experience covert depression, and it's because with women, feeling sad does not unwoman you. It doesn't make you less of a woman. But being sad and helpless as a man makes you less of a man. So what he says is, okay, let's assume that there's this swing between when something terrible happens, you're going to go down. So if men go down, but they can't be there, they then need to swing to the other side into grandiosity, he calls it. So if we look at what we see, for instance, is when men get fired, instances of spousal abuse just track completely. So he says, let's just assume, for an instance, that this is someone who can't feel depressed and has to then flip it. If we look at all the spousal abuse and look at what we see as increased use of drugs, sexual acting out, and abuse, and anger and violence, if we look at that, men are just as depressed as women. But they just can't experience their depression as depression. They need to experience it as rage, anger, or some other more powerful emotion.
Or power.
They need to reassert power in it very reflexively, immediately. And I thought that was interesting. And I think he has, there's points that I disagreed with, which you can discuss, but I thought that he was right there. And I'm curious if that makes sense to you or not.
Can't ask me about sadness, man. I've been repressing sadness for decades.
I've never been depressed.
Yeah. Wrong guy.
I think we have our answer.
I don't really get angry either, though.
Yeah.
Well,
so what he says is that, and even the self-improvement bug, which you and I have had in a big way, is, and I think it's adaptive. There's nothing wrong with this, but he says what self-improvement is you feel less than, and you go, no more. I will be better than.
Yeah, that's true.
What doesn't happen is a return to we're all the same. I'm not better than you. I don't constantly need to prove myself. I don't constantly need to find ways to stand above, beyond, be recognized. He talks about 3 kinds, I'll see if I can grab them, of what he calls false self-esteem. And I thought it was interesting because we talk about building these kinds of self-esteem as the building blocks sometimes. Performative self-esteem. What am I capable of doing? Other-based self-esteem. What do other people think of me? An attribute-based self-esteem. What do I have? I have a smart kid. I have this car, etc.
I am strong, I assume.
Yes, I have a great body. And none of it, and this is just what I call self-love, he calls self-esteem. So we do agree. None of it is just I am good enough. I just am. I'm just good enough as I am. And one of the points that he makes is that there's, rightly or wrongly, women are included. It's very tough to not be a woman if you're a woman.
Sure.
There's no trial or tribulation that you necessarily need to go through. There is what we discussed, there's this whore thing that can happen that can knock you off. But with men, you got to prove it. You know what I mean? You do not get there by default. And that makes people feel not as much, which I thought.
Is that bad?
This is my thought. So then I listened to this and I went, And he told a story, for instance, I'll give you a story because this was exactly my thought. I was like, I wonder if you're not setting the world up to live in this very soft, wonderful place where nobody needs to be tested or proved and everyone's perfectly enough as they are. That's not the universe that we live in with its demands.
Well, and the only reason I ask is because I've heard so like Peter Attia, someone I've heard great things about, admire, but there's other people I've heard a lot about who seem to be admirable, and they would advocate that to transition from a boy to a man using a trial that proves you're there is actually incredibly important.
Yeah.
And that it's one of the things we're missing is I don't even know what to call it, but like
a rite of passage.
Yeah, a rite of passage.
Yeah.
Like that idea that you did earn it, and congratulations, you're full of merit or ability at this point. So I'm not saying one's right or wrong, but that's my immediate question is like, do we need to live in a world where you're not trying to become something or grow into something? We're not going to have that metamorphosis from a 10-year-old to a man?
Well, I don't think that that's exactly what he was advocating, but even what I do think he was saying is that you are enough the way that you are. And I very much agree on one spiritual level, but I do think that sometimes can neglect the physical reality that we live in. Now, we're all very lucky that we can go to the food store and purchase food. And, I feel great but even I feel great because I can financially provide. It's like, that's necessary. We need some sort of stick to drive us towards these things.
Well, or not. I mean, like I've always said, I don't mind if you want to just, if you don't want to change the way that you live, you want to eat garbage or do harmful drugs or starve to death because you can't provide financially, but you just choose that. That's your right. I actually don't think anyone has to live a good life by other people's standards.
Just to live, just to make it, just to have sustenance.
Yeah. But if someone's like, listen, I hate working so much that I'm just going to get by on food that other people give me while I play video games. Like, okay, you can have that choice. And then like how you feel about yourself will be a symptom of that. But you don't necessarily get to also have high self-esteem if that's the choice you make to like live off the charity of others and play video games all day. Yeah. And I've talked in the past, I like video games. I'm not trying to poo-poo them, but I'm just saying, yeah, you have that right. You can just live off the charity of others while you do nothing. But then like your self-esteem will be what it will be. You know what I mean? I think it's tough to live that way and also have incredibly high self-esteem and be proud of yourself for the way you live.
I agree. This is why I prefer the distinction between self-esteem and self-love, which is to say self-love, I think you can have at any point, in any place, in anything, and just be like, I am, that's enough.
It can be the beginning of your self-improvement journey.
Or the end, the alpha and the omega.
Yeah, it can be full of self-love while you recognize that you're not proud of who you are. And out of love for yourself, you're going to grow and change and become someone you're proud of. Like, that's what I would advocate.
And we might be having a semantic disagreement with someone that isn't here, which I suspect we are. But so he might just have different words for all of these things is what I'm saying. But he tells a story about his son. His son was playing hockey. He cleated him up, put on his skates. He went out there. He complained about his feet. He said, keep skating, don't quit. He was 10 years old. He came back. At the end of the game, he took his skates off. He realized he'd put them on the wrong feet. And he'd given his son, so he had really bad blisters. And he reflected, he said, if this was my daughter, Justinia, instead of my son, Justin, would I have behaved differently? And the answer, to my shame, is yes. And I went, I understand what you're saying. I wish you had done that. But life, even when the cleats are on the right way, can create blisters and hurt sometime. And maybe I haven't let go of the idea that little boys need some gentle but training to deal with life's blisters. Now, we don't want to inflict them needlessly by putting their skates on wrong. And could you have looked at it? But let's pretend that the skates were on the right way and he was still getting blisters. Do you pull him out of the game and say, we're not doing this? He can't skate anymore. He's got bad blisters. We're not going to do it. Like, is that good for that little boy? I'm not convinced. And I don't know that, at least on this podcast, he addressed the fact that the world is painful, is not easy, requires grit, requires suffering in order to move through it in a way that keeps you alive. And I do worry sometimes with this, boy, I have to ask this question. Would I do this to my daughter? Would I do this to my son? And if the answer isn't identical, then I am somehow being sexist. I don't subscribe to that. I'm open to that idea, but the idea that boys and girls ought to be raised the same seems to me a dangerous one.
Well, I mean, the other thing is like, if the person doesn't like ice skating, don't force them to play hockey. But
no, you don't have to.
At some point, no matter what the sport is, whether it's basketball or violin, or guitar, you're going to have blisters on your hands. And like, I think
metaphorical, you might not get blisters, but you won't want to. It will become difficult.
It's going to hurt your fingers.
It will become somehow difficult mentally, emotionally, or physically.
No, I think like, I don't know, I'm not a parent, but my thing would be if you don't like hockey, you don't have to play hockey. But if you are quitting everything that you do because it gets hard, we have to sit down and have a talk about the value of doing something when it's hard. You know what I mean? Because you're not going to like being an adult. You're not going to like the results of your life. If you continue with this mindset that as soon as it's hard, you quit.
I feel like I'd like David Goggins to sit down and talk to this guy because
just bash heads against each other.
Yeah, well, to see maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. But it was David Goggins' whole thing is embrace the suck. It's got to be hard. The blisters are your thing, and I do not sign up for that. I'm closer to this other guy. Like, take my skates off. I quit.
Well, that's why I think it's nice to let people try stuff because, like, you get. If I were playing guitar, something that I never found joy in, and my hands started to hurt, I'd be like, I don't want to do this. When I was training for MMA, I would get literally punched in the head, which does hurt. And they'd be like, you okay? And I'm like, yeah, let's keep going. The round's not over. Because I wanted to push through. Does that make sense? And I think at some level, maybe you have to instill that in a child, that it's worth pushing through for things.
Yeah.
But for an adult, if you're an adult listening to this, I mean, I think there's, hopefully you find things that you like enough that give you the joy or the outcome or the satisfaction or the esteem or whatever it is that you find it, you want to push through the pain.
Well, what about the difference between boys and girls? This is one of my questions. Like, do you have the same standard or should one? I know we're not parents.
I mean, I'm so limited, right? I'm a boy and I don't have any kids. The only person I can look to is my sister. She's tough as shit. She's just as tough as I am. My parents certainly didn't raise her.
That's not true.
You don't think so?
Steph is tough, but she's not anywhere near as tough as you are. You went into a cage fight, man.
In high school, she was. In high school, she was hitting people with lacrosse sticks and stuff. I was playing basketball.
Girls lacrosse is not boys lacrosse, man. Okay, she's not anywhere near as tough as you are.
I was playing basketball and volleyball in high school. Exactly the same as field hockey and lacrosse.
Steph is not anywhere near as tough as you are.
Maybe not now. We were in high school. You know what I mean?
So I can't. I'm trying to recall back to this. And this is not an insult to her. But I do think that sometimes...
of course not.
I do think...
How could anyone be as tough as me?
You're really freaking tough. Like, you fight people. Fought.
Retired.
People. Busted your hand punching someone. Nearly needed surgery. I'm not knocking her at all. But I do think that sometimes we can say, wow, she's just as tough as me in order to... Do you really think that's true?
I don't know. Maybe you're saying she's tougher on the spectrum. Here's what I would say. On the bell curve of men and women.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
She's
100%.
Further towards tough for women than I am for men.
Yes. I think that might even be true.
But then you're saying put everyone on the same bell curve.
Yes. That's like saying Steph is taller than me because she's taller.
Yeah.
She's not.
All right. That's fair. So maybe I was saying she's tough relative to her teammates.
Exactly. And this is the crux of my question I think that boys and girls, on average, not every single one, this is so important. If you're 6'5" and you can deadlift and you want to carry people out of burning buildings and you're a woman, fantastic. That's amazing. But comparing people to the same spot on the bell curve and saying that she is tougher than me, I think is it's flawed. It's a really not good way to make decisions about the world.
Yeah, that's fair. I think also your self-assessment and your assessment of other people might get frozen in time.
Sure.
Which is to say, like, I wasn't tough growing up. So myself, as much as I joke, I wouldn't necessarily describe myself using my 33 years of life experience. I think if you're like, how tough are you? Or how athletic are you? I might ping back to when I was 16. And I don't know. I'm not saying I do or don't, but like, there's certainly... that's a possibility in terms of my own self-assessment, that it might not update as regularly as I get older. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It might be caught in the times that I got beat up as a kid or whatever and be like, oh yeah, no, I'm weak.
Yeah.
Because even though I want, because put it this way, I won a fight at 28, sanctioned fight in a cage. Both people agreed to it. I lost a fight at 12. I lost a fight at 10. You know what I mean? So I guess maybe in my mind I'm 1 and 2.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're only 4'10". Yeah, I got you.
So who knows? But I mean that genuinely. Like, perhaps my own self-image is frozen in time to some extent, and all the self-improvement has pulled it up. But I think all of us have inaccurate views of ourselves to some degree. Maybe mine's just caught back in high school.
Sure. So, and when I was just reading this thing to return back to it, I had simultaneously a feeling of agreeing strongly with a lot of what he was saying. I was like, wow, I do think that there's more depression in men than is recognized. And the flip to grandiosity, I think, occurs more reflexively in men because there is a complete lack of safety, feeling shame or vulnerability, which is I can relate to. And it would be healthier if men could recognize that state more and recognize the bounce to like, I got to be better than, do better than, and how unhealthy that is and unsustainable that is in the long term. But also there was a degree of the question, would I raise my daughter this way? I don't think is necessarily the right question to ask. Like, I don't think, and well, let me now take the other side, I suppose. Maybe it is the right question. Maybe boys and girls needed to be different 1,000 years ago when it was physical attributes were literally what kept you alive. And if there was a war, like you needed to do that. And maybe today where that stuff has shrunk and matters much less, maybe boys and girls can be raised more similarly. And this idea of men being so different from women was for a time that is long past.
Well, I mean, I'll say something that sounds like this person might not agree with. I'm not convinced that using your failure, your sadness, your anger, whatever, as fuel for self-improvement is a bad thing at all times. Maybe if you've been doing it for 15 years and you've got everything looks good externally, but you're miserable, then it's time to like stop using that stuff as fuel. But I'm not sure that at 16, that's not a good idea. It's just to go, I'm frustrated with my circumstances. Maybe my parents don't have the money that I want. And so I'm going to use that to get great grades, get a scholarship, get out of this shitty neighborhood and be successful. And I'm going to use that as fuel till I'm 25. And then I'm going to go, I'm really hard on myself. It's time to start to work on self-love. I'm not sure that's the worst thing for someone who's lower class at 16, growing up in an area that they hate and they have hatred for their surroundings, the way they're raised or their bullying or whatever, versus embracing it and crying, like embracing their
he would agree
sadness.
With you. You're phrasing it, is a good point, a different way. He says the adaptive child is the maladaptive adult. And so what it's to say is everything has a season. You know what I mean? Like, that's
what I'm saying.
If you need to do that at 16.
And if you've never done it, if you're 30 and you've never done it, if you're 30 and mostly you've been apathetic and you're finally going to take how you feel about yourself or your body or your relationships or your job or whatever it is and use it as fuel for the first time, that seems pretty appropriate. So I don't think it's an age thing necessarily. I think it's a phase thing. I have friends who did use that as fuel for a decade, made themselves wealthy, but continue to pursue the same thing. They never adjust or they never reflect on
is this working
what their
anymore?
Fuel is. You know what I mean? And they've gotten themselves out of their childhood bullying or poverty or whatever it might be. And they're still running the same pattern. That guy should probably like
soften up
somehow like soften up or do some therapy, do some child reflection. But yeah, I mean, I really think that there's a time where it makes total sense to use this stuff as fuel to improve your external life.
Yep. He would agree. That was the strong sense that I got. He's speaking to Peter Attia, who is apparently by his own admission, like is a hyperachiever, has done all these amazing things, but is a ball buster and way too hard for where he's arrived at in his life. Does not need to be so aggressive, impatient, and win, given his current station.
Yeah. And I guess that's the thing. That's the interesting thing about Goggins or this person who it sounds like it wasn't even Dr. Attia. It was whoever was speaking to him.
No, sorry. To be clear, Dr. Attia goes to this guy as a therapist. His name is something real or right.
Okay, so there's like this therapist, there's Goggins. The idea that these different solutions are for different people in different phases, I feel like is the answer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like to be Goggins all your life could be very self-destructive or stressful depending on who you are. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it's great. But it seems to me like there's, depending on where you're at in life, a time to fuel personal development, change the world, conquer the world. And then there's a time to like hug yourself, nurture your inner child, reflect on your childhood, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of, and let's move on in just a moment, but it really does remind me of the tension between politics and conservatives and liberals, which is to say, what I think is sometimes lost in these, you're doing it wrong, is like, no, the past has a reason. There was a good reason that you needed to get ahead and not be second place and not take no for an answer. Like it made total sense. And that's the conservative view, is like the traditions and the ways that I've done things have deep value and I can't just throw them out. And then the liberal side of things, or the left side of things is, but not today. Like we've moved past that and we can let go. And then of course there's a tension of recognizing what you can't let go of, reviewing it, and then moving towards something new. So cool.
Do you want to go to questions?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Cool. First one is it's a two-parter that are totally unrelated. First one is Jordan Peterson is quite misunderstood by many people, as Joe Rogan often points out. From a charisma perspective, what could Dr. Peterson do better in order to be misunderstood less?
I have. Do you want to go, or
Sure. I mean, I'm not sure how often he's misunderstood versus purposefully misinterpreted. That's my first reaction. Is I think he does have charisma things that he could do better, but I think he's certainly tries to choose his words very carefully so that he's not misunderstood, and often is. And I think that that's because a lot of times if someone is arguing something you don't believe or something that you want to defeat, there is a serious advantage to mischaracterizing their argument, especially when they're not there. So like a news media, a YouTube or whatever it is, when they're misunderstanding Jordan Peterson so that they can defeat his argument and promote a belief counter to his, I don't think that's on accident. So that's my first thought.
So what I see in him is that he doesn't build bridges. He states what he believes without, and I know that he can, but it's just his habit, without thinking, how is this going to connect to where you're sitting? So if he's sitting across from someone who deeply believes that there is a wealth gap between men and women, and it's completely unfair and it's based on sexism, and this data shows it, and he has looked deeply into the data and has found that there's a whole confluence of reasons, and it's different job choices and all these kinds of things. So he knows where she is. He knows where he is. This is Kathy Newman. And he just says, well, it's just not the case. And what he doesn't say is, I can understand why you would think that, because you are right. If you were to break down the wealth gap and just do a division by the number of people, you'll actually see that there's a 21 cent. Like, he doesn't build that bridge, acknowledge where they come from. He just states his side. And then when they come at, he goes, well, that's not the case because X.
Well, that might be a good strategy in today's day and age, because if he started his argument with "you are right" and then gave his thing, he would just get clipped. Someone would just take his 6-second thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's a really, really sad state of affairs, but you have to be so careful with what you say, because people will purposefully remove all the context around your sentences.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure. So I'm considering that isolated, continuous incident that cannot be cut from the camera. Let's assume that we saw the entire Kathy Newman interview, and if he had faith that it wouldn't be clipped up, that would be what one wanted to do, was build a stronger sense of rapport by recognizing where they're coming from, saying how, if you had their data, you'd think the same thing. I could see why you would say that. What's interesting, and you're dumb for this, and I think that would take him very far. I often see that he knows the rebuttals that they're going to have and just waits for them to say it, instead of preemptively disarming a lot of that stuff in a way that doesn't make them feel caught or stupid when they say stuff to him.
I think this is the truth. There's two versions of charisma. There's interpersonal charisma, and there's what I call "thank you for smoking" charisma. Yeah. Which is to say, is Jordan Peterson trying to convince Kathy Newman, or is he concerned about the audience of hundreds of thousands or millions of people watching? Yeah. Because it might be two very different strategies. And if I'm trying to convince the million of people that are going to watch the interview, I might necessarily have to take different tactics than if Kathy Newman and I are at a bar with no cameras around. Do you know what I mean? Sure. I feel it on the podcast even. Like, it's so hard to try to caveat enough times that people
for an audience
understand your context. Yeah. I felt it when we're talking about the Schmovid. Like, I don't even know how to say enough to get people to be charitable or understand that, like, this isn't an attack. You know what I mean? And so I think Jordan Peterson might just go, people are going to take me out of context. It is to my detriment to say, you're totally right, there is a wealth gap, but here's the nuance of the wealth gap. And he might skip that first sentence on purpose, because he's like, well, I'm just going to eat the Kathy Newman relationship. I'm just going to let it be bad so that bad actors can't take me out of context.
Yeah. And I'll say, and again, this is all in the spirit of positive criticism of him, if he cared. Not that he ever necessarily would, but if somebody feels like you're like him, I do think that additionally, he is so literal. He is so serious when he speaks all the time. I've seen him laugh. There's a Theo Von compilation, which is like, oh my gosh, look at him. He can crack up. He can really laugh, but he does that so infrequently and only with an excellent comedian to his side, that the degree to which he could joke, add levity to his discussions, playfulness, and not that stern, staring back, wooden face.
Well, it might be the cost of his genius. I think Jordan Peterson might be like that off camera. Like,
that's who he is.
He's a genius, and he's very scared about Marxism and all this stuff. He lives in a world of, I think, like seriousness and stakes, such that I don't think he makes. I could be totally wrong. I've never met him in person, but I don't think that's a strategy. I think that's just like
I don't think
how he operates in the world is with that sternness.
I totally agree. I mean, because I've seen him on Joe Rogan, and even on Joe Rogan or any of these other guys that he presumably is comfortable with, he's got to talk shop the whole time. Mm-hmm. They don't just shoot the shit almost ever. And I think that would help him to bridge gaps between people that disagree with him. And you'll see it in conversations in your own life. If things get heated and you can insert a joke that gets a laugh, it just like takes so much of the tension out of the air. And that's not something that he's going to do. So that's not a criticism of him, but he wanted to know why he's misinterpreted. It's because other people are interpreting him as an enemy, and he's not signaling in a very comfortable way that he's not. Doesn't mean that he is. He's just not overtly telling them, no, I'm your buddy, I'm your friend.
Yeah.
So hope that helps.
The second one is, I find myself going through a distasteful cycle with my friends where they do something I disagree with, and then I find myself not wanting to be friends with them anymore, even though I know I will come around to enjoying their company again. For example, the other night, my friend and I got into an argument about walking around downtown St. Louis late at night. I reasonably stated that St. Louis is one of the most dangerous cities in the US, and we shouldn't. However, after arguing, we ended up walking around due to my friend's stubbornness anyways. It ruined the night for me, not because I felt unsafe, but because I had lost the argument and my ego had been bruised. Given that I'm the common denominator, what can I do to not resent my friends when they do something that makes me want to distance myself from them?
Do you want to go? Do you want
Sure.
me to go?
No, I mean, I have a thought. I saw this question ahead of time because it's a Patreon question, so I wrote down my thoughts. I think that basically you can release the resentment and go on the walk. You can also release the resentment and part ways. You know what I mean? I think that you're an autonomous human that can make your own decisions, and so are they, to the extent that you can persuade them to your side using charisma or persuasion or whatever. That's great. But if you do hit a roadblock, it's totally fine. Just be like, listen, I love you. This is a terribly dangerous city. I'm not going to go on this walk. I'm just going to go home instead, but good luck. I'm hoping nothing bad happens to you, but do it in a way that's not resentful.
Yeah.
You can also be like, you know what? I think this is a terrible idea, but I want to continue the night. I want to keep hanging out with you. I'm going to roll the dice on this, but you didn't strong arm me into it because I'm still an autonomous adult. So I'm making this decision on my own. And so I'm not going to resent you for it either. So I think that the big thing to me is like, they can't make you do it. So don't feel like you have to persuade them or else do what they say. There's a third option where you just separate. And I think if you give yourself that option, then maybe you'll have less resentment because you won't feel like forced into it. Like their stubbornness can't actually make you take action if you give yourself the option to just hug and part ways.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think resentment often arises when you feel someone has done something to you which you are now cannot avoid. They have forced a feeling on you or forced a situation on you. And the degree to which you're saying that you just go, no, I have control of this, is like the resentment won't really arise.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're going on a walk and you don't need them not to. You don't need them to, like, but the degree to which you need to control them and you can't, that's where the anger and resentment builds up. Another brief recommendation is check out A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. I'm going to recommend it in the next video, audible.com/charisma, but if you want to read it, you can read it as well. It is really good. And the one thing that I remembered, I should read it again because it's not second nature to me at this point, but he talks about the feeling that you get when you are made less than and how you can feel. Just like this doctor was talking, you could feel yourself shrink on the inside. You feel less than. And then oftentimes you feel yourself explode out. And that's the ego going, you've wounded me. Like, I'm the best. I will recover.
You have to listen to me.
Yes. And that's the shame grandiosity cycle.
Yeah.
And what Eckhart says is just watch it. And if you pay attention, you're like, oh my God, I feel myself shrinking. And then you feel the anger, like, and I feel myself growing.
Yeah.
And it's just a really useful process to watch, just to see how it unfolds. And when you're in that observer seat, it tends to control you less. Cool.
Next one is, hey guys, I'm starting my first year of teaching and I'm wondering what kind of advice you would give to teachers in general. While kids and teens aren't necessarily your demographics, I think it's fair to say you're both educators, and charisma/emotional mastery has a huge part in captivating and teaching an audience.
Sorry, what was the first sentence once again?
I'm starting my first year of teaching, and I'm wondering what kind of advice you would give to teachers in general.
Got it.
So this isn't a charisma point, but I think when it comes to teaching, certainly like our success has come from packaging our information into something that's fun to watch. Mm-hmm. And I just recently saw an MIT professor who was teaching about conservation of momentum for angular physics. And that sounds really boring, but the way he does it is he spins a bicycle wheel, sits on a chair that's on a rotating thing, and then when he tilts the wheel, it makes him spin. And it's not because it's air resistance, it's because of the... And so anyway, you're like, that's really cool. That makes me want to learn this. And so if I had to teach anything, my thought would be, how do I make this interesting or fun to learn so that the person wants to learn it? And I think back to some of the worst teaching experiences I had as a student were when someone was just forcing me to do this. And I was like, well, why do I have to read this? Because you have to. And it's like, okay, I was a kid who liked watching Shakespeare plays as a child. I actually really enjoyed it. I was a loser. When I was told to read a Shakespeare book, though, depending on the teacher, I would read the whole thing or I would absolutely not do it and just look up the wiki. And it was just based on if they made it think, if they made me think it was going to be fun to learn or fun to do after, if there was an activity that learning this material was going to let me participate in that was going to be enjoyable, that's to me what I would do if I were a teacher.
And story is, okay, you're going, how do I do this? Well, if you're a history teacher, story is going to be one of your primary tools, right? Because that narrative function is going to be what hooks people in. I think the worst way to learn anything and the least fun, though sometimes necessary, is rote memorization. Mm-hmm. And so I think back to trying to learn scales on an instrument. That's how you get people to quit an instrument, is you teach them scales. If you wanted to stick with it, teach them the old standards. And if you wanted to love it, teach them the basics of their favorite song, just the melody.
No, find the simplest pop song that's popular in their age demographic and teach them to play that.
Just the melody. Yeah. And then you go, okay, we're going to work on and you don't need to know the notes right now. You don't need to know any of the scales or the Dorian or the Phrygian modes, but that's what we not started with, but it was scales. I remember. And I played the guitar. I still don't know my scales, and it's time for me to learn. And now that I'm into it and I see that, oh, wow, if I learned these scales, I could solo. I'm actually starting to go back and really drill some of the scales and learn exactly where the notes are on the neck, which I had no idea for years and years, but I can play just fine at this point.
And I think, for instance, you're a history teacher. I remember hating to learn history, even though I loved medieval. I thought medieval times was so cool, armor and knights and all that I thought was great. But I hated to learn history because it was just memorizing dates and places. It was literally just where was this battle? Give me a city and a date. And then you look at Vikings, the History Channel TV show. Now, granted, some of it's kind of bogus. They have Odin show up as the god, and depending on your religious beliefs, you think that's fiction. But it shows you that people will voluntarily learn about it's the first time the Vikings sacked England if you make it an interesting story. You know what I mean? And I think there's just a way to add that into your teaching in such a way that it's not Vikings level production, but that it's more captivating to people.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any additional things. So this is a weird one. The way that this is, I'm gonna give this is so meta right here. I'm gonna do this the wrong way, and then the way that people teach is general to specific. I just gave a general, but you have no idea what I'm talking about, right? Here's a specific. When I do the charisma videos, what I often try to do is show an example of someone doing something, and Bradley Cooper cracking a joke and then waiting and looking around while people laugh, and how he gives everyone 3 seconds. And then I say, this is the 3-second rule. That is specific to general. The way that people learn is specific to general. You give them an example, a thing, or whatever, and then you teach them the rule. But once you understand something, it's often very tempting to start with the rule and just leave people completely lost, like I did when I started telling the story.
Yeah. So here's the example of that MIT professor again. Yep. He literally starts the class, I think, by being like, check this out. You know what I mean? Maybe it's not that broy, but it's like, hey, look at this. Sitting on a chair, spinning myself with a bicycle wheel. Why is this happening? And then he goes into the rule. You know what I mean?
Yes. Specific example and or story comes first, not like I did right here. And then you tell them the rule. And that sticks with people in a much stronger way. Are there other things that I've learned from these videos? I actually have a list. I was going to make a video on how to be a better teacher. I'll have to pull it up sometime. But I do have a list of things and that was one of them that I've taken. So maybe next time we can talk about it.
Yeah. I'm sure there's also a way to gamify it, which I never had a teacher do, but I'm sure there's a way to make learning fun, even when the topic's not fun, just because there's some sort of system in place that incentivizes you to keep learning or playing or doing whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The truth is, which is such a shame, is that you feel this way. I think most people feel this way. They graduate high school or college, spend a couple years just not doing anything, then pick up a book or a thing and realize how much they love music or reading or learning.
Oh, especially kids. Kids love to learn.
Yeah. Kids and school just beats it out of you.
Yeah. You start going, why?
Yeah.
Why? How?
Yeah.
Why? How does this work?
Don't
Why
ask.
does this work?
Just remember the date.
Yeah.
Don't just remember the date, get the A. So there's a really good book by Ivan Illich. I forget exactly what it's called, but it talks about some of the problems with schooling back in the 70s. And it's the same as the Mark Twain quote that is, never let my schooling get in the way of my education. And just keeping that in mind, that school is often a hindrance to the love and the passion of learning, and then doing what you can to break it free of as many of the structures as you can within that environment to keep kids' love of learning alive. I feel like that's one of the best things you can do. If you can help a kid get out of high school or out of college with that fire of loving learning still there, you've done them a great service. And if you're the one that just snuffs it with dates and reading crappy Charles Dickens books, like then shame on you.
Yeah.
Why didn't we read Harry Potter?
Yeah.
Like Great Expectations. I know somebody out there likes that book, but my God.
No, that's a great point.
That was
why?
so bad.
Yeah, why does it have to be an old book?
Yeah.
This is a short one, but when I was learning math, my mom just made it pizza because I was 4 or something.
Yeah.
I like pizza, so it's like it wasn't division. It was there's a pizza.
Yeah.
It has 8 slices. I eat half. How many slices are left?
Yeah.
Just kept my attention a little bit more because I was a kid and I was like, pizza? What if she'd been like, the number 8 divided by 2 is what? I'm like, why? I don't care.
Yeah.
Why do I care?
Why would I ever need to do this?
Yeah. Who cares? And she literally just made a pizza and I was like, I like pizza.
Yeah.
4 slices.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
Next one is, my housemate and I are generally fairly comfortable approaching girls in bars and at parties, etc., although some of your charisma tips have certainly helped. But in cases where the female group size is bigger than ours, for example, 2 of us and 4 of them, and we want to strike up conversation with only 2 of them, it feels awkward. What are your tips for both striking up conversation with groups of, say, 4 girls when you are a pair of guys, and how to keep the conversation rolling? We aren't crippled with approach anxiety, so we'll definitely try out any suggestions.
yeah, I mean, the easiest thing is don't try to approach just 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at least in the US, everybody's different. If you do this in Brazil, people will think that you're hitting on whoever you're speaking with. At least that's my experience. But in the US, if I'm one person and I want to go talk to a group of 3 people because one of them is attractive, I start by talking to all 3 and just ping around and try to be fun and make the whole group laugh and like me.
Mm-hmm.
And then that way, when you do inevitably say like, hey, I'm going to go to the bar, like, do you want to come with me to the one that you're most interested in? The other 2 friends are like, yeah, do it. This guy's great. We're rooting for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I would actually say that the thing that's hurting you the most is this mindset that you have to go in and immediately extract the 2 people you're attracted to from their friends.
Mm-hmm.
I think instead just have the whole group like you, and then the friends will be rooting for you. They'll try to set you up.
Yeah. It's been a long time since I've been out at a bar, not just because of coronavirus, because of my advanced age. I also have to admit, as soon as he said group of females, I heard the rest of the question in the voice of David Attenborough and was just completely a group of females here. You can see walking in the corner.
Nice.
So recollecting as best I can, one of the things that I do remember was important is, as Ben said, speak to the group. Have a conversation that is high energy, fun, and references the group as a unit. Like, instead of like, you can ask, of course, their individual names, but what are you guys up to? You know,
how do you guys know each other? Instead of walking right up and being like, hey, you're really pretty. What's your name? What do you do? And acting like the friends don't exist.
Yes.
Say, oh, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah. How do y'all know each other?
Yes. The group is a y'all at the beginning, which makes sense. After a period of time where people feel comfortable, what we also found is it could feel strange as if there's 2 dudes over here and then 4, sounds like 5 girls over here. What you want to do is integrate the group to the best as you can, so that you're not just 2 guys standing here asking questions, answer, question, answer. And so one of the guys,
for people listening on Spotify, because you can't see what he's saying, just picture like Civil War armies in a line. That's often what happens. One group on one side, one group on one side, facing each other.
Yes.
Unmingled.
And you can even be like, this is strange. I feel like this is a, 6th grade dance. We got the boys on one side, the girls on the other, and then just have somebody walk to the other side and go, okay, much better. I feel like an adult now. Or whatever. You don't need to use them out the words. The point is to integrate the group in such a way that it becomes genuinely a more organic group. And this way, it's not your group asking their group questions. Now this can subdivide into separate conversations where one friend talks to 2 or 3 and the other friend asks 2 or 3 questions.
It just feels more organic.
Yes. And at that point, then you can start to have individual conversations, or again, you can subdivide. You can be a pizza that goes into slices as opposed to halves that need to address the other one.
But the friends are your friends and allies. They're not your enemies to be cut away from the group. I think that mindset shift will help a lot.
Cool.
Last one is I have a question for you guys. I have a younger brother who feels like everything has to be funny, even at the expense of others and often at my own expense, and an optimistic mom who seems to follow his lead. So it's extremely hard for me to be taken seriously by my mom when my brother's around, and it pisses me off. What advice could you give me?
Break his legs.
Do we not answer this one already?
No.
We answer similar ones, but
I must have read it. So I feel like I'm having deja vu.
Okay.
Do you have an answer? No. I just was like, didn't we do this last week?
I don't know if you have the answer. You go for it.
So it's a guy that's teasing him and a mom that just goes along with it. And his question is,
my brother's upsetting me, making me angry. Yeah, pissing me off.
Right.
I feel like a broken record. Yeah. So what I would do is I would wait until it wasn't the moment, until emotions weren't high. I would wait until the mom wasn't around. I'd get the brother aside. I would frame it in a way where they could tell it was a different type of interaction. So I would come in and say something like, hey, I want to grab you for a moment. There's something I kind of been wanting to talk to you about.
We need to make a video that just references this, because so often people ask, how do I deal with a personal relationship in my life? And it's exactly what Ben is saying, which is separate the person. Go ahead and continue.
No, you create a different frame where where the person knows this is a unique conversation relative to the ones you've had in the past. It doesn't have to be a big deal. You don't want to walk up and say, hey, there's something really serious I need to talk to you about. But you just create a frame, and then you talk about facts and feelings. So whenever you're talking about something that someone's doing to upset you, to the extent that you blame them, say, hey, you're mean, they're going to fight you on that and feel defensive. To the extent that you even say, like, you were a jerk, that's not a fact. So you just say facts and feelings. You made this joke and it made me feel bad about myself. You said this sentence, and you just say word for word what it was, and it made me feel
I would just
blah,
correct,
blah, blah.
I felt, not it made me.
Oh, sorry. Yes. I felt blah, blah, blah. Yeah, definitely. And that way they can't push back on you, because facts are facts and your feelings, everyone's entitled to feel whatever you feel. So you cut through the defensive part, and then you can have a conversation that's more based around the behavior that you are experiencing and how you would like it to change. Whereas if you go in and you talk about what they're doing wrong, or you label them badly or something, it becomes an argument.
And then give them a concrete ask, which is, can you in the future not do this specific behavior or add this specific behavior? And then that's that. Cool.
Facts and feelings.
That's all we got for non-Patreon questions.
All right. Thank you guys so much. So last month we came close. The final billing day, we did dip beneath our required 1,200 for 4 episodes. We're going to continue to do it, but to the degree to which you guys are enjoying this and want to add to Patreon, it would mean a lot to us, because we'll hit that 1,200. Justin will be a happy man. He'll get paid. He'll get paid regardless.
Not that I'm not happy right now.
But yeah, so it really does. It's funded the podcast. You guys have been literal life support for this podcast, and to the degree to which it exists at all into the future, thank you guys so much. So for those of you who are already patrons, thank you. If you'd like to join, please click that link in the description, and we have some bonus questions for you. Also, I will say, if you're arriving here at the end of this podcast, you are a patron, you're not a Patreon person, please let us know what perks you might like, because as we shift into, please keep this podcast alive with your donations to, okay, what's in it for you other than these podcasts? I do want to know what you guys care about. Is it a book club? Is it an ability to vote on topics? Is it, I don't know, answering questions, conversations, Ben playing the guitar for you.
Oh, God. Audio game nights.
No, and for I think so just so people are aware, just so
Twitch streaming.
Well, just so you know, so $1,200 a month lets us have Justin come once a week. $4,000 a month would let Justin be full-time on this podcast, which would allow him to focus on it, make it his full-time thing that he put his love and attention to. So we are trying to figure out how to get to that magic number.
Yeah.
And so to the extent you can help us understand what would be worthwhile for you, that would incentivize you to donate and help us to fund Justin, that would be very helpful.
Yeah. Because at 1,200, you'll get your 4 episodes either way.
Well, I'm saying,
so now I need to sweeten the pot a little bit.
Yes, but it's not like the money goes nowhere. The money is the next goal is to have Justin full time, and so we're trying to figure out how can we incentivize people to help us get that.
Yeah. Last question. I'll ask this and say no, because a lot of people always say yes to these things, and I realize nobody's voting no in the comments. Do you guys want us to talk about the business of Charisma on Command and/or the podcast at all? Do you care? It's a conversation Ben and I have every day, but not on camera because I don't know how interesting it is. So let us know if that's of interest.
Yeah, and if you don't, just say no. Because if we see 10 people say yes and 50 say no, we won't do it. But if we see 10 people say yes and no one say no, we won't really know what's happening.
Might ruin a podcast. Cool. All right, that's it. Take care, guys.